Uganda will the next year start processing and exporting meat as the government is working with Norwegians to set up meat processing factories in 4 regions in here in the country. Bright Ramirama, State Minister for Animal and Industry, did confirm that the first factory will be built in the Central region, then Western region, Eastern region and Northern region that will follow as well. The meat products will be exported to the European Union and the Arab countries. Government is also in partnership with Makerere University targeting 2016 as the year to start beef exporting to Norway from Uganda and to the rest of the European states.
We are compiling this information so that we build up standards, procedures which are required by the international community in line with the World Trade Organization standards, what we call the sanitary and phytosanitary standards. And key in this area is that standards must be met right from the farm up to the table, what they call from the stable to the table principle.
The 2008 livestock census figures from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics indicate that Uganda has 11.4 million heads of cattle, 12.5 million goats, 3.4 million sheep, 3.2 million pigs, and 37.4 million poultry. To meet Uganda's vision of exporting meat to high-value markets by this set year, a 4-phase approach that will include the identifying of livestock farmers and encouraging them to form groups for adequate production of animals for the meat export industry will be adopted. Through farmer groups, farmers will be provided with better animal breeds suitable for production. Livestock farming in Uganda does not meet the international market, and this attributes to having traditional trains undergo total overhauling, including the upscaling of quality and standards of animal products, if they are to sustain a European Union-ready market. Samuel Semanda, the Commissioner in charge of planning at the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal and Fisheries during the one-day symposium at Imperial Royal, advised the exporters to ensure that the supply of meat can meet both the regional market, local and the international demand once
a collection of huts in an enclosure.
Research and development is talking about efficient production. In an advanced form, it's talking about influencing customer loyalty. We know we have a market in Norway. I also want to remind you that the East African community is here, and in particular the East African Common Market, which have fully participated in its establishment. What are we positioning ourselves to do? And remember, we are going to export in accordance with the standards the doctor told us of SPS under WTO. Because don't expect that it's going to be a common market and products are going to move not per standard. And therefore, as an entry point, I hope that this workshop is not only going to look at exporting to Europe, but we begin with our neighbors.
For Uganda to achieve a sustainable and continuous supply of meat on the market, a lot needs to be done in creating linkages between sectors and intersectoral policies that have to be reviewed in favor of meat export to the international world.
One of the things we have done is first to review the various policy documents that have been available in the Ministry of Animal Resources. And also secondly, we also looked at other documents, international documents, and some case study countries. Now what we have realized is that there are so many things that government has been doing, but these things were not connected. What we would call intersectoral policies have not been harmonized. You find people at the Ministry of Agriculture are doing certain things, people at the Ministry of Trade are doing different things, and most of these things are trying to address the farmers' needs. But because of lack of harmonization, it has been very difficult to achieve results.
And so the consequence is that our people, most of them, the dealers, are not aware of the standards that are needed. This country needs those standards, needs the guidelines, and the people need to know. And these guidelines are going to be generated, and when they are adopted, all the stakeholders will have their input.
the physical changes, the chemical changes, the biochemical changes, and the microbiological changes. Because these changes impact on the quality of the end product and also on the safety of the food when it is on the table.
To encourage livestock farming and to ensure adequate production of animals for the meat export industry, it will be very important to identify key players in the livestock sector and encourage formation of farmer groups.
For us, under Uganda National Farmers Federation, we view this as a very good development because all along our meat had never gone out of the country, actually, to those developed countries. So what we shall do is to guide the farmers to start producing quality meat, because for meat to be exported, it has to be of good standard. It has to meet the sanitary and phytosanitary standards which were set up by the World Trade Organization.
As a union, we have to build capacity amongst ourselves, amongst farmers, so they talk to each other, so they exchange information, so that they are better their farm management practices. And farming is a business, and it should be run as a business. And one should do all the things that needs to be in place. You've got to make sure that at the end of the day, you're making more money than what you put in. If you're losing money, then it's not a business.
We shall be addressing the project through a number of activities, and among the activities that we have chosen is to specifically identify areas we are calling disease control zones. Because one of the problems we have in international meat trade is the presence of some internationally deterrent animal diseases that would prevent us from entering the export market.
Government should therefore take a deliberate effort to rally farmers into a unified and cooperative action to facilitate the realization of an export-oriented meat industry in Uganda.
So the private sector will help us on beginning to grade the meat and paying its worth.
We will have to make sure that farmers have made their input, the cooperatives have made their input, the districts, the police that are involved in regulating and ensuring that the legislation is enforced, as well as the policymakers and institutions like us that are involved in research and capacity building. We need to work together to make sure that the system will work and will work well. You have seen, for example, the way animals are handled on farm. How are they fed? The animal welfare is a critical issue because it affects the quality of the food and also the factory. If it's a dirty factory where you produce the animal from, then nobody's interested in taking your product.
Here is a clip of how we get our own cows transported to the abattoirs. With modernized and designated centers in different regions, standardized abattoirs will reduce on the transport costs currently incurred, thus improving the price of beef positively.
Then the way you transport the animal affects its quality. Not only that, but also the spread of disease. But the product itself is affected.
We are going to encourage traders to transport animals properly so that they may have good quality meat and good quality animals when they arrive to where they slaughter. So with that, because we know that because of the laxity of implementation of policies, traders tend to do things the wrong way, and in the end, it costs them.
In addition, we would like to have in place support services like the laboratories that will be able to investigate the diseases and to investigate the samples, the meat samples, before we export them, whether they are free of disease, whether they are free of drug residues we use in the production, and so on and so on.
Lack of government policy is seen to be a primary barrier facing potential exporters in developed countries regarding food production and consumption. It is important to appreciate the fact that those sanitary standards are not a guise for protectionism. Therefore, if Uganda is planning to market its potential in beef exports, they must meet relevant international and developed country standards in order to tap into the existing comparative advantages in livestock and meat production. Compiled and presented by Hans Chaze for UBC Television.